Next up, agenda item 10, which is the discussion of the long-range planning process.
Easy stuff here. This is the beginning of the discussion, and one of the things, when we have done this before, I think the board members that have been through this, you know that we have an endless list of wants and a finite amount of resources, and because of that, the finite amount of resources, we've got John Wolf here to discuss what we can afford, and it's a board decision on where we want our millage target to be, and then we've got Sean here to discuss what those wants, needs, cost, and what that might look like. So I think probably the first thing that we should do is let John join us and talk about what our capabilities are with our resources first, because otherwise we could go on and on about all of our dreams and visions and then realize that later on those dreams are dashed because we can't afford them.
Should we make it?
Yeah, John, why don't you...
Take Harry's spot.
Yeah. That'll work. And he's brought the typical handouts that he brings that when I first became superintendent here, I could read these. My eyesight has either gotten worse or his font has gotten smaller. I struggle to read them, and I didn't bring my magnifying glass.
But they're color.
Yeah.
Color coded.
Well, I'm worse than Dr. Simpson. I'm over there with the light on the back of my iPhone zooming in when it was cloudy earlier, and it's not a lot brighter, but it's actually a little easier for me to stand up if everyone can hear me okay. I think the key word that Dr. Simpson mentioned is John's going to talk about what we can afford. Well, that's really what you guys decide is what you can afford from the aspect of the discussion that started, I think, back in 2013, maybe 12. I lost track, but over at least the last 5 years, that the district had a period of time where for those of you that are part of this discussion, I won't go too long through this history, but you had your sinking fund or your bond levy fall to zero, essentially. And the district had 2 elections. The most recent election was in May of 2015 that passed 75% for the bonds that we issued over the last 3 years. The last issue was actually October. We closed October 2017. And then we had bonds the previous 2 years prior to that, 16 and 15. And so the decision at that point in time in calling that election addressed what can we accomplish, what are our major priorities, while at the same time, what mill levy or tax impact do we feel would be accepted by the voters within the district. Our target at that point in time was 15 mills. It's a target. A lot of things, a lot of moving pieces as to trying to get to 15 mills. We have to estimate what your net assessed valuation is going to do over the period of time that those bonds will be outstanding. But the big issue for the 15 election was Charter Oak Elementary. We knew that would take a bond that would have to be spread out over a number of years. So that was going to take up a good portion of your 15 mil target for the period of time it was outstanding. And so when we looked at going out 8, 9, 10 years for a bond for the Charter Oak Elementary School, then we knew that would carve into whatever your other needs were until we got closer to that time period. And so at that juncture, 15 mills being the target, each of the first 2 years' mill levies, and I can tell you this year's mill levy will be under 15 mills. Probably be closer to 14 and a quarter, maybe as low as 14 mills. Your county assessor's office has, they have certified your net assessed valuation for the upcoming year, and your net assessed valuation went up 5.02%. We have in the handout, we assume 4.5%. Guthrie's NAV has grown in the last 3 years greater than it did, I think, the previous 6 or 7 years. There's been development along I-35. We're developing in the right area as far as for school districts where we provide net assessed valuation, but we don't provide a greater demand as far as you would see where you have housing development where you do get a larger net assessed valuation, but then again, you also have to take on the cost of the additional students. So it's worked out favorably for the district. So the question is what can we afford? The determination was made back in 2014-15 prior to the election that the Charter Oak Elementary School would be out there for quite some time. So that would be the first big project that you could address, and it would be some time before you could be back in the market to be able to issue bonds in that range, dollar amount. And so what you have in front of you are 3 different spreadsheets. First one, assuming you carry on at 15 mills. That's, if you determine, well, that's what we say we can afford is 15. Well, I've also provided to Dr. Simpson, these are numbers I provided, I think back in May or June, a 17 and a 20 mil. And the reason we provided that is those were the mill levies that we considered back in 2015. We knew you were going to go from essentially 0 to 15. That was going to be a huge leap for the taxpayers, property owners within the Guthrie Public Schools. But we were, because we're making such a leap, we felt that at that time, the district felt at that time, that was palatable and can accomplish some major projects as we've gone over here this morning. To revisit, if you look on the first page on 15 mills, and you look, instead of looking, I provide this spreadsheet. Sometimes Mr. Salee might ask a question on how this fits in and how are we assuming interest rates and so forth, or Jana might ask another question. I don't want to focus so much on how all the numbers add up to get to your mill levy. I'd rather focus on the blocks that are on the left-hand side of this sheet as to those are the bonding capacity levels for each of the next, let me see if I can read my own small font, out to 34. And so I just blocked these into 2 different election authorizations. One that you could have as early as next year. And you as a school district, when you're looking at developing your long-range plan, school districts in Oklahoma typically do not like to have the levy fall off much because of this one factor. You can go to your voters within the school district and state that we plan on keeping your mill levy at the level that it's at now. It gets a lot harder when if you're at 14.5, 15, you drop down to 11, and then you educate. So, well, we're not going to raise your taxes. Well, you're not going to raise them higher than they were 3 years ago, but you are going to raise them higher than you did the previous year. And the continuity of the mill levy being at as close to whatever you set your target at, and in this case it was 15, to continue at that level provides for, like I said, a continuity of addressing the projects, whatever they are, large or small. But as you can see, in the 15 mil scenario, in the first block on the left-hand side, there's not a lot of capacity between 19, 20, 21, and 22. In a 15, you're a little over 2 million in capacity. But we addressed this in 15 that what projects would fit into those size bond amounts. And in looking at those individual bond amounts, most of those bond amounts are around 500,000, a little less, a little bit more. Doing a bond for that size of transaction, that's in the bond world, that's a fairly small transaction. And you have professionals, you have our fees, you have bond counsel fees, you have these other fees. These dollar amounts might look better if we grouped 2 years into one and did essentially $1 million issue, where it would be more economical for you, but it would depend on your needs. That's under the 15 mil scenario. We keep at the target we're at now. Now you can see after the next 4 years, you have another couple years of bump up, and that's where you get to address your other major needs of the district. In addressing what you've done in the previous election authorization, you addressed essentially outside of technology. You addressed, and if I missed something, Dr. Simpson, let me know. You addressed improvements and a new construction of a new elementary school. You did not address what I would say 99% of the other districts in the state do. You didn't address how you bond other small capital items. Textbooks, uniforms, every other district bonds for those items. They can't go longer than 5 years on the term of the bond. But there is that automatic bond issue done for a majority of the school districts. They may not do it every year. They may issue bond proceeds, and that covers textbooks, software, license agreements, uniforms, band instruments, all of that. And so we did not put that into the last election as an optional type of use of capital. And you might be sitting around saying, well, textbooks aren't really capital, but they are eligible in Oklahoma for funding under GO bond issues. I'm not proposing that. I'm just saying that's an area that wasn't addressed. And because of these dollar amounts, if you determine that, well, we can't really do much with that sizing to keep it 15 mils, what could we use those dollars for? Yeah, we have needs for maintenance in a certain couple different buildings or majority of the buildings, but you could also use those proceeds for those type of expenditures if you deem necessary. Like I said, it's just an option that other school districts use. So an example, can you use GO bond proceeds to fund the salary and benefits of a security officer that you were talking about earlier? You cannot, but you can red money, green money. You can use GO general fund monies that would usually buy those textbooks, buy that software, use GO bonds, and then release that money to afford those other types of expenses. It's just out there as you kind of think. This is 15 mils, the first page. 17 mils, if you flip to the second page. And if anyone has any questions, please interrupt.
Well, one thing might couch with all this, John, is our debt ceiling is at 10% of our net assessed valuation. So growing our net assessed valuation is very important to allowing us to get money sooner. And that's why I'm always in favor of any kind of item in a community inside the school district that will grow our net assessed valuation, especially as John alluded to, when it doesn't come at the expense of rooftops that provides us more students, because that's a very big game changer for the school district for our ability to produce capital expenditures and capture these funds.
And I want to, real quick, to address this, because we've been with the district for 5 years, I think, been with the city of Guthrie for 15 years. And this is outside of the funds that you receive, but I think it's important that you're well aware of this, because we represent the city, we know financially how they're doing. Their sales tax this year, last 3 years, it's the highest sales tax the city's collected in the previous. In essence, in 2000, the sales tax that's collected in 2003, 15 years ago, that sales tax has doubled. there are very few communities with the recession we had from 8 to a couple years ago. A lot of people said the recession is still out there. So you say, well, how does that help the school district? Is as you develop and you develop retail and sales tax and so forth, it helps in Dr. Simpson's discussion with city, the city as overall as a community, what's available citywide. And I'm not proposing that the city's going to give up any sales tax, but you're seeing growth in NAV in the school district. You're also seeing it in sales tax in the city. And it's a period over the last 3 years that hasn't happened the previous 15 to 20 years. So that's positive for this community overall. That as you look at basically as a citizen within Guthrie proper city, within the city corporate limits, also within the Guthrie School District, what am I getting for the taxes that I pay, both sales tax and what do I get for the ad valorem tax that I pay? So I just wanted to throw that in. The second page is going from 15 to 17 mills. It's really a matter of just seeing how much more capacity, when you look at those blocks, as how much more capacity do we get, and how much additional capacity do we get earlier as we plan. So this is more just a planning tool for you to circle those numbers. Is that right? John's talked about kind of what the dollar capacities might be to do projects. Sean gets up and says, well, here are the various projects that Dr. Simpson has addressed with us, and these are priorities, maybe different priorities than there were 3 years ago, and this is how much this costs. And then you could hopefully, just do some very basic math in your head. Well, I think we could probably do this and this and this, but it's going to take 5, 10, 15 years to accomplish that. The last page is just a 20 mil scenario that we provided, which shows an even greater ability to fund projects, but it is going from 15 to 20 mils. And so you sit here and you listen to me talk about millage. Right off the top of your head, that's a 5 mil increase from one target level, 15 to 20. 5 mils on a $100,000 home is $4.16 a month. So if you were looking at someone that says, I own a $100,000 home, it's 11% assessment ratio, used to be higher. That would generate essentially what you're seeing on the first page to the back page, an additional bonding capacity if you went from 15 to 20. Now, that's a big leap. 20 has always been a concern for the district, as we discussed, is, how does that stack us up? We were at 0 so long ago, now we've been in the 14, 15 range. Actually, you've been closer to the bottom 14 range based on your growth in NAV being better than what we projected. We do, in all three of these spreadsheets, assume a 4.5% growth every year. We've been fortunate. We've been over that every one of the last 3 years. As you develop in different parts of the district, as far as valuation of property, we would hope that continues at that rate. The one thing that I didn't pass out because I don't think it's really going to dictate which direction you go as much, but just a little bit of color that as you look at other districts around you, what are their sinking fund mill levies? How they, where are they, and how do you compare? We've done this each and every time we've discussed talking about mill levies. That your surrounding communities, I have it on my phone. I think I left my phone over there. Piedmont, Deer Creek, I think maybe most of you know, very high millage rate. They're above 35 mills. City of Edmond, closer to, they've been up and down, but closer to 25 mills. Stillwater Public Schools, closer to around 25 mills. They go up and down a mill or so. Oklahoma City Schools, probably in the area as far as sinking fund mill levy, the lowest at 18.25 or 18.24. Now these are mill levies from last year. These aren't what's going to go out in your tax bills here in the next 3 months. So when you look at where we, just kind of recap, you had an election in May of 15. 15 mills, accomplished projects we just talked about, passed 75%. Don't know, it's impossible. I really get a kick out of everyone guessing, well, this is how it passed, or this is how it failed. No one really knows. But 75% is a mandate for either the projects that were addressed, or the mill levy, or a combination of both. And so, just to put this in perspective, if you go back to the voters, you can, without the mill levy falling off by having a year you don't add a bond, you have a deadline of probably safer that if you had a February election, you could close that easily before July 1. I want to say February. Let me grab something because there's some dates that aren't available.
One of the things that is always interesting about this is when we talk about what money could be available based on the mill levy and everything else. The challenge we had as our mill sinking fund went to zero is we had an 18% tax increase essentially on property tax. Keeping it level so that we don't have those peaks and valleys is so critical for households basically, and that getting that 18% tax increase on the property tax was such a challenge, and that was born out of I'm just going to say it, the failures of the other bond issues as the millage gradually reduced. And so then the other moving part to this is, as our net assessed valuation is growing at a faster rate than projected, that mill levy will also drop as it's paying it off sooner. And so it makes it even more critical that if we want to keep that consistent mill levy, that we take action. But the other variable that as we bring Sean into this mix soon, is as you look down at what when these dollar amounts could be available in a successful bond issue, a $10 million building today will cost more when we have the availability of $10 million. And so, and I'm saying that because even the board members that were around when we passed the bond issue will, it's important that we revisit this, because the construction inflation we have to account for somehow in this as well, as we plan what our dreams are based on what we can afford and what we feel like the community will support with the village.
John, let me ask you a question, maybe. So as I look at these projections, whether we settle on 15 mil, 17 mil, or 20 mil, and then I consider the fact that the community is growing as rapidly as it is, the city of Guthrie is doing well, I'm a little hesitant. Do we as a board, should we pass a series of revenue bonds that extend out for 8-10 years? Or should we break it in smaller chunks so that we can evaluate what the net assessed valuations are doing, the evolution of the community as it relates to sentiments on taxes? I mean, if we were to settle on a 15 mil target now, we're talking about committing the district for up to 18. Well, that's with the second, at least 8-10 years.
Right.
So 8 years. So, I guess I'm more inclined to say, well, let's go out to, we really can't build a new school until after 21. So say we settle on a 15 or 17 mil target out until 21. Then we can kind of see what the demographics of the community look like, what the economic growth looks like, what the net assessed valuations look like, what the tax sentiment is at that time, and then allow the Board of Education at that point in time to make decisions going forward on what this looks like.
Well, and that's true, and I guess it's a matter, as I sit over there and Dr. Simpson said, well, let John go first. I'm sitting over before you stated that. I said, I don't know who should go first, Sean or me. Because Sean may come over here, and if this was a whiteboard, and say, this, $60 million. Well, you don't see any plan. So you say, well, what do we back off? What do we decide is a priority? Cotterell was a priority back in to be replaced. And I won't remember a lot of other details, but that was the next school. I don't know if that's with this, with this board, with this community, is that the next, is that still the same priority? And so when we look at, well, what if we and I understand you assess, I guess to a certain degree, you assess the demographics and what direction you want to go with the schools, but you balance that with how far behind are you in facilities and how far do you have to go. You might end up, and that's up to each individual board member to say, well, I think we're okay where we're at. I think with this elementary school, I think we have some maintenance and repairs, but I think we're okay. We don't really need to address any new school facilities for a while. Then that's part of the process to say, well, let's kind of see where we grow. Now, I will tell you, 4.5% growth a year that we've kind of instituted, that is not conservative. That's pretty aggressive, but we've seen 2 years. I was curious. I didn't find out till the day. I had the county assessor's office send me this morning the NAV report. I thought, wow, let's see if it just keeps going, because I knew Love's was added last year. Love's a significant valuation on, don't have the top 10 valuations, but how many more Loves are you going to get? Because Love's could very well be. Love's brings in $500,000 in sales tax probably a year. It's tremendous, not having the records, but just knowing what they are in other communities. That's huge. How many more facilities that have a $10, $15, $20 million valuation don't know where they're going to be? So you do need to have a combination of both.
Yeah, we've had La Quinta and the Hampton Inn, both added, and Love's.
Guthrie trucks, the travel center there, Bolero, when it was added too?
Yeah, that was added first, and Love's came after that.
And which one's in the TIF?
Bolero, but the TIF's paid off.
Is it? I knew short term. I lost track.
Yeah, and the Bolero is part of the TIF to finance the getting the
Utilities.
the sewer across I-35. But that was a short term that was actually paid off early.
One of the shorter TIFs you're going to see.
Yeah.
Trust me. So yeah, I mean it's a constant mix of what the projects are against this. Now remember, targets are targets. You can establish 20 mills as a target. Doesn't mean you go out and you issue bonds to try to achieve 20. It's just when I looked at back in 14, looked at the demands that were put in front of us with the cost of everything. That was priorities at that point in time. New Cotterell. I think there was maybe another elementary school that.
Well, we kicked around at the time building 2 elementaries and even longer term financing. As we kicked around building a new, what is now Charter Road, and rebuilding Cotterell in the same bond issue. And we departed from that.
I guess my answer is, Mr. Slee, as I hear more about what the needs are and what the demand, what the general, what Dr. Simpson addresses us to analyze that. Certainly, you don't know where Guthrie is going, but they're going positive as far as economics, and so you will get a bigger bang for your buck. But because we are assuming 4.5 and you're growing at 5 to 5.5, almost 6%, that's great. But we're kind of assuming 4.5. So right now, the impact to the district or the benefit straight from bond capacity from your assessed valuations of your properties, 4.5 unfortunately are about on as projected, a little bit higher, which is a great thing. It's just, I don't know, I really don't know how much more we could rely on in growth. I would suggest not changing higher than 4.5 right now. It's one of the few school districts we budget that high in growth.
And John and I have that discussion routinely. In Ponca, we used 3.5%, and there were times that we didn't meet that, and because of various things with the ConocoPhillips and going on and stuff like that. One of the things that is potentially a game changer is if we had relocation of some industry to Guthrie. But it depends also on the incentives that could be offered and how that would flesh out as well. I know that and also retail, but industry brings the greatest growth of NAB, and because a lot of times they come with expensive technology and things like that. I think also there's one other thing that I want to mention, but I'm just going to mention it. I didn't have John prepare any documents on it intentionally, but he offered to. But there is one other option, and we chose not to explore that this last time based on the conservative nature of our community. But there is an option of lease revenue bonds, which allow us to forward finance at a greater rate. And the rationale behind that is that you limit the construction inflation by getting a lot of money up front, and you essentially mortgage yourself for a longer period of time versus gradually getting the money as you sell your bonds. It allows you to legally exceed your net assessed valuation cap of 10%, because it involves a trust, and I'll tell you the fees are higher. I'm not advocating for that today with this board, but if I don't make sure that I make mention of that option, I wouldn't feel like I was doing my job. That was pretty non-committal, wasn't it?
Well, and Dr. Sims is correct. I mean, it doesn't mean everyone else is doing it, we should do it. Some of our districts take advantage of that, some do not. Some districts can afford, Edmond can afford to, Sean may beg to differ. I mean, even at the amount of bonding capacity they have every year, it doesn't do everything they need to do, but they're fourth high school, things that may be out there that are significant value, costly projects. A lot of districts have done this statewide, and everything Dr. Simpson says is correct. Nothing's changed from when we talked about this 4 years ago. Now, from how economically it works, but it has to be done correctly, and there's a lot of nuances to that. But it does you basically make an economic decision. You're hedging. You're hedging that inflation will exceed interest rates. And in that case, if you can borrow at one rate and let's say you borrow at 3%, and inflation, Sean says, is going to be 3.25%, and you say, well, their costs, they're the biggest discussion on leasing. Well, there's a lot of other costs. What you're doing, it's a separate transaction. So you go out and do a separate transaction. You can do a bank loan or a bond. Let's say you do a bank loan. It's a lease. And so somebody else owns that building or those items, and you lease it from them. It's not counted as debt, but you get it constructed now versus 10 years from now. And so you just hedge, and there's not exact science whether or not you're going to end up being the best economic decision for the community. And so you have the interest you're going to pay on your bonds. It's going to take out this lease that you would have like anything else we've talked about. That is what it is. The concern is all right, but we're also, in the meantime, we've got this lease that we're paying interest on. That's interest on top of interest. But you've got to almost take this lease, move it to the side, and say, what's inflation going to cost us? What is this going to cost us? And if they're about the same, or they're less or more, you guys make a business decision whether you want to do it or not, and whether or not that makes sense to do it now. And I will say, a lot of school districts, it's not just pure economics. They need to, they're growing, they have to get something done. And those that will say, well, sometimes it's just pure political, let's not even use the word political. It's excitement. We can build this in 2 years instead of 12. Our children have this in 2 years instead of 12 years from now. They won't have it 12 years from now, they're gone. And so a lot of those decisions have been made. It is purely a hedge against inflation or meeting the immediate needs that under state law with this constitutional debt cap you can't meet. And I mean, anytime we've done this, we lay out, here are all your costs. But you're going to have a transaction to lease it, you're going to have a transaction to take out the lease. So there's involved both times. And what we end up showing is, here's the net effective rate of you doing this, so you can do an apples to apples comparison. We don't care what direction you go as far as whether you take advantage of that. And it's not even, you select it. It's not an advantage guarantee, because we may some point in time have inflation. A lot of people look at, well, I don't think inflation is this. Well, it's materials inflation. I don't know if we're going to get to where we have 10 years of no construction inflation, or 5 years, or 3 years. So it's your hedge, and that's all I'll say about that.
Yeah, thanks. I've got another question. It seemed like last October we provided some similar documentation that you had the different meal targets, but it seemed like maybe, because looking at this, the bond terms are pretty much the same. But I thought last October some of those bond terms you had shorter or longer depending on the meal levy. Now I know school financing, we're largely constrained by our bonding capacity.
Right.
But is there any advantage with the higher mill levy shortening up some of the terms so they're paid off quicker, and then the future boards can transition to the next phase? Or
well, this is that's why it's almost the cart before the horse scenario. That for the most part, the numbers you see are accomplishing two objectives: statutory cap. You can't go over 10% of your NAV. At the same time, not going over a target mill levy. So 80% of what you see here, I mean, you can manipulate it, $50 amounts, make one a little longer term, whatever. If I knew what you wanted to accomplish in what year, I can't just say this is when you, let me back up. Dr. Simpson, well, here's what your bonding capacity is. It's kind of a misnomer. It's a really good feel of what your bonding capacity is, but it has to do with how much you want to do to win. You can't do 20 million right now, period. You can't do 10 million right now. You can't do 5 million right now because you'll go over your debt cap. That's not up for discussion. But the terms, I try to get bonds off the book as quick as I can, but also realize that you have major projects potentially down the road that you see these balloon bond amounts to accomplish those projects. So in most cases, the terms you see here, the short bond terms, well, we wish we could shorten up a 10-year bond term. We can't, because if you shorten the term, it knocks the mill levy up above 15 mils, because it's a shorter period of time that you do the debt service over. So it is a mathematical iteration process where we go back and forth to try to run these. But if you know anything about running iterations, or if you, I don't know if anybody's a spreadsheet person in here, there's different ways you can run GOSI to kind of achieve. But if you have multiple variables, you do. There's no way to give you exactly what it is, but this is the best guess. But the bond terms, we always try to keep it short as possible, because your interest rates are less. I will tell you, the one thing I haven't addressed here is rates. Since we talked a year and a half ago, rates have come up. Short-term rates have doubled. Long-term rates, when I say long-term, 20 to 30 years, have stayed the same. What we have now is called a flat yield curve, which means you probably, if you have money in a savings account, you're finally earning some interest on your savings account because the short term, they're finally paying. Borrowing has basically come up here in long term, so it's getting closer and closer to where we have basically, you borrow for 5 years, you borrow for 30, you're paying the same interest rate. We're not there yet, but you used to do 5-year bonds for 1%. Now 5-year bonds will push you at 2%. Doesn't seem like a lot, but if you're doing millions of dollars, it affects everything here. That has changed. I'm not going to be a guru and say what rates are going to do, but I bet they don't go back down. Because we were in an all-time U.S. historical low period from 08 to 2015. Two things also changed. When the Tax Act was passed, it increased the corporate tax, decreased the corporate rate from 35 to 21%. You guys if you ever watch any, that came out on just general news. You don't sit and watch CNBC or anything like that. So that's great, corporations, that's great. It's costing cities and school districts and universities and counties. It's costing because the buyer of bonds, significant buyer of bonds, are corporations. Corporations got an equivalent interest rate based on what their corporate tax rate. What does that mean to us? Rates double, not because of the tax rate, but I would say 30 to 50% is because the corporate tax rate went down, your cost went up. Because the advantage of buying tax-exempt bonds is not as great to them because they have a lower tax rate. And that just, what does that mean to you? It means, depending on the size of your community, it could mean tens of thousands to other communities, millions. And that's because of the tax. And I'm not saying good or bad, but that's what happened. So we're not in the world we were a year ago. And so everything, you have to think outside the box. You have to think, what are rates costing us? What are projects costing us? How do we get to do those projects? Do we need to do them now or later? And how does this all fit? It's a little tougher mix now than it was 2 years ago.
John, going back to the short term, if I remember right, when you and I had this discussion, the 2-year and 3-year, I'm on 20 mil levy pay, all of those were pretty much a product of the net assessed valuation for exclusively, weren't they?
Yeah.
Because once we got, because of the duration of what we have right now, pay off Charter Oak and then the third phase of the projects. Is that
right? I mean, if everyone looks at the gray up above on the very first page, that gray stripe, and you have to look. I mean, that was, although we didn't know exactly what net assessed valuation was going to do, that was our intent. That's intentional to try to get them to all group up, all three bonds, to where we got close to 15 mils. Fortunately, you had some NAV growth above what we projected 3 years ago. But you also sold a bond that you got a premium payment that kicks you down to that 12, below 13 mils.
And that's what I wanted to stress to the board is that as that NAV grows and it pays off this faster, that mill levy will drop if we don't take action as well. And so then we could very easily be finding ourselves trying to pass a bond issue not with an 18% tax increase, but an 8 to 10% tax increase because it gradually fell off, and make that a hurdle that.
So if you're looking at 2019, oh my gosh, if you look at under 2019 on the first page, you look at the total mill levy for that year. What do we have? 14. What is that?
14.98.
14.98. If you don't do a bond issue. My God, I missed that.
It's 2.08 would be, it'd be 2.08.
Yeah, it was 2.08, and so
it would be.
we continue this roller coaster. Right?
12.9.
Yeah,
That's what it would be.
And that's, of anything today, that's probably one of the most important things that we leave out today.
Any other questions for John right now?
So to keep it about at that 15 mil, you're saying we would need to do a bond issue for what you're proposed over in the yellow box for 19?
Yeah,
The 2 and the 3 year terms?
Yeah, and Gina, that yellow line across here is the capture from in the millage for that yellow box down there. That's how that.
It's important for us to look at this because as you say, well, how does this all fit? Those are short terms. They're short term for a couple of reasons. One is that it's not a lot of debt. You know, those are small bond sizes. It's tough to sell those in the market if you have maturities that are real small. But two is there is and this Travis kind of referred to this. Well, why are we? I'm wanting those bonds to fall off at those short terms. So when you get out to do the next big issue, those are gone. So you can slip in and do that larger size.
In 2022 or
Right, and that may not be what you guys decide that that's the target time period that you, but I just assume in this case, you have projects lined up at the door that you need to do probably now. And so you're gonna do those as quick as you can, but understanding that if I did all of those the next quarter bonds, and I did those at 10-year terms, actually dragging the levy out, and it's kind of cutting into your ability to do a bigger piece. And that's where the lease purchase process is. We show this to bankers and say, here is what we think. They have us run a sensitivity analysis which says, what if you don't grow at 4.5? They look at future bonding capacity. They know that's their security of paying off a lease. And so you're able to address your immediate small capital needs, and then you address your big need. And that's how that lease purchase concept wraps into this, where you can identify what your capacity is for the next 5 years, and say, well, this money will be coming in, or this bonding capacity is available in each of the next 5 years, but there's a big balloon here in the 5th year. That's what you basically lease against. That money's coming in, you lease it, you pay interest now. So I just want to address that concept that because you're looking in your current situation, you're looking at 15 mils around 2 million capacity over the next 4 years, 19, 20, 21, or 19, 20, 21, and 22. And if there's greater needs than that, you either decide not to do those, you defer those, or you look at other options.
Anything else for John? I mean, I think he's going to hang around while Sean talks too. We've got lunch in the next room, and if you want to go fix lunch and come back in, and we can have maybe a working lunch on in discussion with Sean about that, and then hopefully over the next hour roughly get a little bit fleshed out, and then we'll get a report about the mud hole on the south end of our school district. Yeah, for lunch. Yeah.
Okay, take a short recess for lunch and reconvene. So we'll continue on with agenda item 10, which is the discussion of the long-range planning process.
One of the things that I wanted to try and flesh out a little bit here, I think it's important that as we look at the process going forward of identifying our needs. We kind of heard some of our limitations, but as we identify our needs, one of the things that was very successful in the last process was establishment of a long-range planning committee. we had board participation, we had community participation in the form of parents, people that were retired and maybe had grandkids or maybe not. We tried to go across the spectrum of our community and tap those resources. And the first phase of that was to educate the members of that committee about our current situations and our needs. And then the next phase was to dream. And then the final phase was to make recommendations to the board of realistic dreams based on our resources and what the community would support. I would recommend that we follow a similar path this time to identify and prioritize our needs. I don't know that our prioritization has changed a lot in the time since we did this the last time, but I don't know that it hasn't either. And that's why I think involvement of community members outside of the Board of Education is very vital to the support of bond issues and educating them to some of the information that you already are educated about on school finance and things like that, because they become people that are resources for voters and people that can be a voice of reason when there's maybe misinformation that's out there. And we all know that there's ample opportunity for misinformation, and usually you don't have to go any further than your nearest keyboard to find it. And so I think that's fine. And if there's no objection from the board, I would like to go forward with reconvening that committee. And the board had a lot of input on its formation on the members last time, and I think that would be appropriate again to do so. And if there's not any objection from the board, I'm prepared to go ahead to go forward with that.
What kind of time frame are you looking at for them to bring back recommendations?
Well, and that's a great question, because it depends on how much re-education or education I would need to do about the nuts and bolts of our mission for that committee. If we had some members that had served before that served again, that would limit the need for a lot of re-education, and we could move faster on that. But and as you saw with some of John's information, we probably need to identify those priorities fairly soon in order to try and carve out what the committee would support and what the board's vision would be as well. So I think, last time we took basically 9 months to do that, because we started in the fall and we ended in May, or maybe we made recommendations at the June board meeting. And so it could be faster than that, but I don't know that. But a lot of that just depends on the need to educate the members.
I have 2 questions.
Sure.
Were there any items that were identified in the original long-range planning scenario that hasn't been addressed with a recent bond?
No, I believe that everything that we identified as priorities, we did address. And I would have to pull that up to verify that for sure, but I'm 95% sure.
Well, I somehow recall, and I wasn't familiar with the actual report, I think I maybe glanced through it, but I know that we had Cotterill identified on, I believe, previous long-range planning, which in my mind still would carry over, that hasn't been addressed.
Let me see.
Because we have the school in the south, which is Charter Oak, we addressed a lot of the maintenance issues with the roofs.
The long-range planning committee was, I think, a great strategy and really included the community. But I kind of feel like we can pivot to the next part of that original plan. And I think even before we convene this committee, if we do this again, we at the board at the very least should define I think, what the mill target is gonna be, the bond structure, whether we want an 8-year, bond, series bonds, or if we want to look at the, through 21 and then come back with the new school. I think we should define that before. That's just my sentiments, because like Jennifer said, for the most part, those needs were identified. We were not able to address all of them.
My follow-up question is it going to be the same committee? Because if you get a whole new group of people versus
And
the
I don't really want to wait
original.
9 months. I mean, we already kind of know. I think in 3 months we can be prepared.
Yeah, especially if you gave us dates of February election, closed by July 1st, if we want to act on that.
Because, I mean, even
For
look
short
at-
term, we as a board need to make those kind of decisions before anything else happens.
John, that is correct, February of 2019.
We should actually have a March election, and I think January 9th is the due date to follow the county election board. You have a 60-day notice requirement. So if you had an election in March, we could close by June 30th to get it on the next year's tax roll. So January 9th is really your target date. Back up a week, probably the end of the year, is you need to come up with your proposition or propositions. That's short period.
The bond issue that we did addresses everything that we had for priorities and goals, with the exception of, we put down providing laptops to teachers, which we've improved our technology, but we didn't go in that direction. And it called for a goal of developing a purchase rotation of school buses, which includes 10 new buses every 3 years. That we made the decision not to place that on the bond issue and still use general fund monies for that. And the goal of purchasing a rotation purchase of desktop computers for the secondary sites, so no computer is over 5 years old. We obviously have not accomplished that, and that would be, we would have to do that through bond funds. So I don't think we addressed the long-term technology solutions with bond funds that we identified as a goal from the long-range planning committee. But we did, of the capital improvements, we did address all of those. So I think that's a portion of this is still technology. We're not where we identified we needed to go. But I'm looking here at I think we addressed everything else that was placed on there.
Cotterill wasn't identified?
Cotterill was not identified on this. Cotterill was in some discussions with the board after this was delivered. And
So that would have been phase 1. Was there a phase 2 or 3? I know they were looking down the road.
Well, what we did, priority 1, construct an elementary school in the southern portion of the school district. Since this is the area of greatest student growth, the location will assist in addressing overcrowding at elementary sites. Hopefully, this action will allow closure of at least one of our oldest elementary sites, which obviously that's not an option. But as we developed this plan, the goal became to get our kids out of the portables at Cotterill and Fogarty. Second priority, with the opening of the elementary site in the southern portion of the school district, in a system where attendance at an elementary site is based on geography determined by attendance zones. So we're there. Priority 3, commission an architectural engineering feasibility study for the current junior high school building. The goal of the study would be to better determine a cost-benefit analysis of renovation as a standard school site or the need of a new site for the junior high school. We did that shortly after this was delivered to the board. That's about a 40-page report that led us to begin phase 1 of the junior high renovations. And then priority 4, continue to maintain our oldest sites, Cotterell Central, Fogarty, Junior High, Favor, and administration while they are open through the building fund. Seek additional funds from taxpayers to enhance our infrastructure and maintain our 2 newest sites, the high school built in '67 and Guest built in '89, which are in need of further attention for long-term sustainability. And then the first goal was high school's need of electrical, plumbing, and HVAC upgrades, while Guest is in need of a new roof. And so we are addressing, I wouldn't say we're addressing electrical needs or plumbing at the high school, but we are addressing HVAC, and Guest got the roof. And then it goes into the buses and the technology that I already mentioned. So, and that was delivered on June 10th, June board meeting of 2013. So I would say that we addressed a large, virtually all of that, of those priorities. But and to your point, if we want to hammer out a strategy of millage, that helps that group to focus and not spin their wheels with the dreams that are not realistic too. So
Okay.
so what's our millage target? So that Sean knows what his
Answer that
boundaries
question,
are.
please.
Because Sean's got to know what his boundaries are.
Is there any reason for the next bond proposal to go out through 2026? Can we not break that? And the first one to have more of a maintenance bond, and then readdress maybe a higher millage in 21 for the new school?
You can do that.
I mean, other than strategy and trying to, I understand that's a separate discussion.
Sorry, I can see it.
Okay, mind if I close the door?
Now, let me-
Have the door shut.
Can't have it shut, open meeting.
Oh, well, then just, okay.
Probably your neighbors, just go tell them to
And
be
it
quiet.
probably is, it's probably my family.
Oh, let me go.
They can go here all the time.
But to answer your question, you certainly you can go out to the voters for, it's more dollars than it is years. So you can ask for $500,000 or $50 million. It's up to you, and you decide whether or not we're just going to do major maintenance issues on the next election authorization, and not so much address any major renovations or school replacements. It's up to you as to how you want to encompass this next election. I just broke it out, just as an example, going out far enough to provide substantial bonding capacity to potentially do a handful of your projects that are on the plate.
And to kind of just piggyback on that, thinking back to our original maintenance bond issue that we tried to pass, that was what, 2.9 million, that just got slammed in the dirt too. We were trying to do a responsible short-term small loan, and that wasn't necessarily the perspective of the community. I just want to put that out there for consideration.
Definitely what this is.
Well, and I think also one thing that comes to mind with that, to Jennifer's point also, if you have specific targeted needs and it appears to a segment of the community that they are not the recipient of some of those targeted needs, then it calls into question their support of that bond issue with only if all they get is a pledge that they're next on the list. that's something to consider. And that is one thing that when you do go to neighborhood schools like we are, equity among buildings becomes a very big issue that we need to continue to monitor.
So if we were to go ahead and move forward with this plan in 2026, the new long-range planning committee then could advise on where the new school is located, the size, in addition to just new maintenance. It gives them a little larger mandate.
Yeah, and the issue with Cotterell on that, and Sean and Stacy Group has looked at the Cotterell site with the idea that we could build a two-story structure where the parking lot is while school is going on, and then demo the old building, and that turns into a playground. I mean, we didn't draw any prints or anything, but we did kind of do a site plan. Yeah, of that. But that being said, there's always opportunity to look for other land. From a geographic standpoint, we need a west side presence, in my opinion. And I think we have growth on the west side, and I think it's important that we maintain that presence there. So, but I think from a long-term perspective, since we have been very conservative on any kind of projects in the current Cotterell building, we probably need to have some plan of addressing that, or we need to begin looking at that from a maintenance standpoint, because we've got major roof issues there, and energy efficiency issues. We still have single pane windows in most of those classrooms and things like that. But putting money into that building with the ADA challenges that come with that building is what we have avoided up to this point.
It looks like just on the mill levy, it's about a 2-year difference in how fast you can get that school. From 20, you go to 15 mil, you're probably going to be in 2024. And the 20 mil looks like 2022.
Which means we're probably not in it until 2023 or 24 anyway.
If you start from 20,
Yeah.
If that helps you plan as far as maintenance, any deferred maintenance or that you would plan on the school.
A couple things, if general consensus, we're not taking votes here, any action, but the general consensus, we need to do something with Cotterell, that dictates what I do with the bonds prior to that are sold. Because you basically have to have those bonds falling off in those short time periods, so you have the capacity in the year that you decide to do something with Cotterell. So as much as I say it's up to you, if any one project, whether it's Cotterell, that's an $8, $10, $12 million project, is definitely something the district wants to address in the next 6 to 7 years, then it has to kind of lay out like you see here. It's just, as Sean stated, you go higher mill levy, you jump up to 20, you get immediate boom because the very first year out, because you went from 15 to 20, and you can do that. But if Cotterell maybe isn't the priority of the school board or of the committee, that can change the way some of these pieces work. And that's, if we're looking at March election, January 9th, December 31, we are 4.5 months away from nailing this down to the letter. And so early on, I think we need to decide if we're going to take on a major project in this next election. So I can kind of tell you, because of everything I just said. So.
Let's talk technology a minute. Eddie?
Yes.
What does a laptop basically cost? What does a computer in a classroom cost?
Laptops and computers probably about 1,000. So, pretty close.
So is it accurate to state that with a 17 mil levy, the school could be built, well, late 22, early 23?
Probably 23, I mean, just until we define that. You're right there in the cutoff between 11 and 13, like, with that being 3 or 4 years out. You're right in that ballpark.
And that's doing nothing else.
That's doing
between
nothing,
now
we're just
and
dead till then?
Correct.
So
No, no,
probably-
that's-
Then you do the smaller issues. right
Okay, so
before
that is allowing for.
So with the 17 mil
to
levy-
keep the levy
Yeah.
Yeah.
stable.
Well, I guess, Sean, what's your dollar figure on an elementary that doesn't require a tank or a lagoon or a fire pump?
Or a
4 years from now.
Well, I mean, you are money ahead on that site. It's a smaller site, right? It's not, I mean, we're not, I think that site was like 9 acres, I think, or somewhere around there, then we did the math on it. So your infrastructure cost is less. You're not grading, 15 to 18 acres worth of work. So we originally, back in 13, when we did this, we budgeted 12.5. That might still be close. Might be a little more than that, depending on inflation.
So,
2 stories going to affect, the cost.
but there, if at 17 mils, we wouldn't have enough money until 23 to do that, and we wouldn't have any other projects along the way.
Well, wouldn't you, from 19 to 21, you'd have a few $1 million there, right?
Well, that's cumulative, that far right column is cumulative. So if you gotta get to 12.5 million, that money's gotta sit in the bank and draw interest.
We came in at charter oak at what?
9, 5.
9.
9.5.
And I know we're looking
Well,
at.
10.5 with all the FF&E and all that stuff.
Yeah, but if we're not having to do a lagoon, we really, for the most part, the infrastructure's there. It's just gonna be demo and tie-in.
Right, yeah, and that's what I was saying, it may be a little less than that, I hate to undersell it, but it may be a year, that's why I was saying you're kind of, maybe a year, depending on when we get tighter, maybe a year earlier if we can hit that $11 million mark.
The other thing too is the type of, it'd be conventional construction, and we had a lot of the building Charter Oak was metal building.
And it's 2 stories, so there's a little bit added cost with the
Yeah.
elevators and things like that.
I don't understand why we would pursue a 2-story building.
Footprint, smaller footprint.
To fit it on that site, you'd have to, but if you had a new site, then we could do a single story, but to fit on that footprint, it doesn't fit any other way, it's pretty tight.
I was like, 'cause it's pretty locked. I mean,
Yeah.
where there's no expansion area around.
Yeah, it's not the perfect scenario, but it's, but it's, there's no land acquisition and there's no utilities. If you go much further west, the sewer ends on the north side. I'm pretty sure the sewer ends at Academy or just right there. And is that Academy? Or what's going to the soccer fields? Yeah, okay. That's, the sewer is there, and it extends obviously further on the south side because of the hospital. But we don't have, going much further, we're looking at another lagoon.
We did very similar project in Coweta. We built a 2-story elementary on the same site and then tore it down and flipped, and it really wasn't much more than a square foot than the rest of the buildings were costing at the time. It's a few dollars, pretty close.
They did the same thing in Will Rogers and stuff.
Yeah.
And it does save you that land cost, which is nice as well.
And that Stillwater project, they had, they were able to get that additional land from the city, and that made a huge difference.
So I guess the question I'd have then is, can we defer any other projects while we accumulate money for a new school? Or we're going to have to push a school out there for a year so we can address other maintenance needs?
Well, Cody, I think Cody will tell you that we've deferred about all we can defer on a lot of things, including we've got HVAC issues at Guess that we're trying to address it with building fund money. We need plumbing upgrades at the high school in a bad way. And then we hadn't even talked about the junior high. And of course, we've got the issues at Fogarty that we're all familiar with as well.
We've got a couple of roads we're still looking at. We have parking lots and just carrying on.
Yeah, I mean, and just an example, we put into repair the track in that first bond issue, and that became a point of argument, and we still haven't touched the track. And things, there are lots of needs that it's going to be hard to defer on.
So I guess, do we have an estimate on the needs that need to be addressed before elementary is built?
No, because we haven't prioritized it yet, and that's something that
You want to rely on long-range planning. But can some of them not be prioritized by the district?
Oh, yeah.
That are just things that are immediate?
And the how we got here on the last bond issue is I asked Jerry Gamble to provide me his priorities on what was most important for our building needs, and basically the approach that he took was to seal up the envelopes of our buildings, and we're on phase one of just doing that at the junior high. We're not even addressing the rest of the outside of the junior high in the current bond issue. So we probably need to finish the exterior of the junior high and continue that restoration in addition to whatever Cody's got on his mind.
We have the junior high children's getting older. We have the central children's getting older, which is, we're talking 20, 25 years old. It's just getting to that point. The junior high chiller has one compressor. We lose that compressor, we're kind of stopped. So it costs quite a bit of money to replace that whole chiller.
And then we've got HVAC issues that continue. We piece that together at Fogarty. Every time a unit goes out, we've been taking $5,000 out of the building fund and putting a unit in. But we're still, are we 2/3 of the way done yet, or are we just half? Yeah. So, and those were the units that were put in 96 when the building was air conditioned. Similar to the chiller that was put in 96 at Central, and the chiller that was put in 96 with the junior high. And we've got a similar situation on the units at Cottle. They were all put in 96 as well.
So what type of money are we speaking of for chillers for the sites that need chillers?
Had to get a cost for that.
That's just a comparable one. What was it for that high school?
What was the cost, remember?
For when we replace the chillers, it was $250,000.
How much?
We did. I can't remember.
90?
So what I'm hearing is that immediate needs from just listening is junior high exterior, chillers, track, and we know security and technology. I mean, those
Well,
are things
I
we
just
kind
use
of
track
need,
as an
those are kind
example
of
of
things that we
defer.
as a board need to be looking at and thinking about what we might want to do with our millage.
John, what's the average county millage? 195? I know it varies kind of within the county.
For Logan County?
Oh, I should say Guthrie School District.
I'm not sure on just Logan County entities.
Well, I I'm just wondering, so we're at 15 mils.
On our district.
So 17,
Account Deer Creek.
17 to 20 mil target, what's that, like probably 2 or 3% tax increase?
Right, yeah, 5 would be, yeah, I mean, yeah, we're looking at 5% increase on the 5 mils. 2 mils and 2% on the 17. I say that because there's Eastern Oklahoma's 125 and 135. There's a lot of districts overall tax levies a little higher than that.
The high school chiller was 186,000.
And the junior high is not, wouldn't be that big.
No, but you're looking at, what, 150, somewhere in that range? We get one compressor again either, so change that.
You said plumbing issues at the high school, so is that a critical? I mean, are we trying to avoid it being critical?
It's original. What is there is original.
Well, as I say,
1967.
it was identified, I mean, it was identified on the long range.
Yeah, so maybe that's something we need to put into that mix too then.
You know, the high school is in need of a complete renovation, but that's
That's that dream part, huh?
yeah, that's, and so addressing at least the plumbing fixtures and things like that.
And like electrical, a lot of our schools, high school, Fogarty, Central, other places, we're maxed out. You know, we keep doing technology stuff and things like that to create more power.
Yeah.
To add to that, it's expensive. So we've maxed everything out that we can add to the frame that we have now.
What is resurfacing the track, or redoing the track, or what would you estimate that?
That's probably $250,000.
Do we have the ability to mark the track, the lanes?
Not without a lot more money. Yeah, and that would be a significant expense. Because talking new curbing.
Well, yeah, I mean, a brand new track from scratch is probably
No, we're just short one lane. It was built short one lane.
800? Is that what you just said,
I
800?
mean, to just do a retop, you're like probably 85,000, 250 to do probably a strip down to base, and then you're probably, I mean, to add a lane, you're probably looking at $100,000, I would think.
Yeah.
Because it's not just adding a lane, you're changing drainage and things around. So it gets tough too when they patch it in to not have an issue with. You almost have to resurface the entire track to get that.
The way we do our roads in Oklahoma, it's the same.
Yeah. That's true. It's a pobble.
Take out a section.
Yeah, that's right.
Like I-35. This is why, you know, getting a committee that can work with our staff to get these figures together and get all of this on a focused level is why it's critical to do this, and it will be work. I don't think, but I think I understand where you guys are coming from, because you want to know what do we get for an additional 5 mils, and I think the answer to that is we get further down the road quicker. But I go back to something that I shared with a couple of community members my first year as superintendent after I was familiar with the district, and they had not been in our schools in a long time, and they said, "What do you think about all of it?" I said, "Well, if we had $100 million right now, I'd call it a start." And that's, but moving this down the road with where we are on our millage will allow us take, and you've heard me say this before, take some more bites out of this elephant. And ultimately, we've got to, as we take these bites out of this elephant, we've got to do it in a way where the community still has trust in us. We've shown that trust is valid with what we've done up to this point. And I think we've earned a lot of respect. I think we have a lot more respect about what we've done than we had. And I understand the angst about stepping out too far with that, also because of the history of what we've done. But I think that, in all honesty, we've got the things that we need to do are huge expenses, and that's just to make things functional. We're not talking about building Taj Mahals with waterfalls.
So John, let me just ask you one more question. I think I asked you this before, right? But say we went to a 20 mil and our net assessed value continued to grow at that 5+% rather than your 4.5%. Even though we say we're capping at 20 mil, taxpayers may only be paying a 18.5% mill if our NAV continues to increase. Is that?
Maybe the math, so, I mean, they can pay less than 19.
But it would lower 2 or 3 points.
They gotta remember, it depends on which piece of the property goes up, because if your property goes up, your mill levy goes down, but you're paying the same amount of taxes, because you're valued at a higher amount. Now, the valuations go up not because of the natural growth in residential properties, those that typically vote. It goes up because of the new loves. Then your property can't go higher than 3% a year on a automatic appreciation or state law now. But it just depends on what the composites of your NAV growth is for the next 10 years. Because I want to make sure when I say that, when your NAV goes up, you're assuming some of that is your house value is going up. So your house value goes up, it's based on the value of your house. So your mill levy goes down, but it's an equalizer. But if 50% of your growth over the next 5 to 10 years is commercial, you as a resident that's going to vote for this or not, that certainly could fall down to that range. It's just, I don't know how much of the growth is going to be in just general appreciation of residential properties as opposed to new facilities coming into Guthrie. So, but the math is there that if we grow up over 5% every year for the next 10, 15, 20 years, the mill levy is going to drop. But it really depends on valuation, so forth. Depends on your county assessment also.
Can't go lower than 11% on the assessment ratio.
About 4.5% is probably about as aggressive an assumption we want to.
I would not.
It's pretty generous.
That's pretty generous, and it's really only because of your history here in the last couple of years and your growth out of the corridor. My 35, I don't really think that's.
I just don't know if taxpayers will go to 20.
And my preference would be to set a target mill now to define. They set your budget up on the front end to let the committee then bring back recommendations that fit within that.
And just a reminder that was a goal even from the performance review, is to set a target mill levy for bond issues. It provides transparency to the community about what we're trying to do, and it provides them a reality about this is what we can afford. And it has been very successful in other districts on continuing to pass bond issues. And that number is different in every community. In Stillwater, when I was there, it was 25. What is it now? 25, 27.
Yeah.
In Ponca City, when I was there, it was 20. One of the things that we could actually accomplish more with that 20 mil levy in Ponca City than we could with the 25 in Stillwater because of the refinery and versus all of the state land that's in the Stillwater School District. If the number is 15 here, then we figure out a way to address our issues at 15 mils. And when people want to know why things aren't happening faster, we tell them this is what we have decided to do. And if the prevailing opinion of the community is to raise that higher, then we can address it at that time. But that's the direction that you guys provide me.
The only other thing we have to mention is that, and Ms. Davis had asked me at break, she said, well, you know, how far can we go out? You can go out and you could ask for 100 million and you have to the end of time to do 100 million in debt. You can ask for 10 million. But the point is, if you go out and ask once and you don't come back for 7 years, you don't have to worry about that one election where the city or some other entity had something on the ballot or you just went through a bad time and we vote no for everything. You take that out of the equation. If you go to them, go to the voters, March next year, one thing you're like, oh, well, what's going on in March? Well, as far as I know, the city's not doing anything between now and then or for the next year. I don't know if the county's looking at anything. So, is there any elections, anything else? You look for, you have to base, as much as you trust that everyone will vote, that will show up, and they represent what you may think is the true. If you did an exit poll or a poll now, if you have a bad election day, obviously that can make the difference. You guys had 75% last time. As you had stated, the one before, smaller issue, failed. This one passed by 75%. Don't know, I can't even remember the precincts, what those percentages were on each one of the precincts. As were some 80 and 85 and some 60. I can't recall off the top of my head. So, does it have to do with a specific project? Did the school help it pass or help it, or bring it down? And it would have been an 80%. That's the less times you have to play risk with your voters. That should be in your consideration too.
And we had excellent communication.
Yeah.
I think that is what made us
I think
succeed
it
the
is
last
too.
time, is that we had a plan, we identified what the issues were, and we demonstrated organized.
I think so too. We're more transparent. John, kind of if I'm reading this right, on the front page, down to 2019. Okay, the bonds for proposal for 2019, we'd have 1.5 million to deal with. Is that correct, or am I reading this wrong?
On the very first page?
Yes. This second little column here.
No, it's a 600 and then an
And then
additional
320 on top of that.
320.
So you have 920.
It's this.
Oh, I was reading the wrong columns. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we're 9. Okay.
And the cumulative kind of gives you an idea of,
I like my numbers better.
I do too.
Okay. I understand Cotterell is a great dream, and I want that to succeed. But I don't want to hold everything else off just worrying about Cotterell when we have some initial small needs we need to accomplish within our school system. And that's that's my thoughts, is that we've got that list of priorities there, that some of those we have to be able to meet needs in a shorter amount of time and a quick amount of time without spreading it the next 20 years. Even when it's 15 to 17 mils.
So if we were to defer to do elementary for a couple of years and address our needs, then we'd have to figure out what it would cost just to keep Cottle falling down, right? So we're probably going to end up.
Fall down, it just,
Well,
at least take on water.
Take on.
It might sink, but it's not gonna fall down.
Sink or float away.
Get some of that flex seal.
Well, I think essentially what we need to do is, the board needs to give you direction on the mill target. I'm comfortable at 17 mils high,
I am too.
as high as I can go.
Going higher without taking vote, yeah.
And so, I would just suggest that, sounds like there's some agreement there. And I'm okay with the long-range planning committee personally, but I would like to see that wrapped up by maybe November, so that we can get some, I know that's really quick.
Yeah, well, that's a good deal if that's the direction we want to go. For a long-range planner, we're talking about a short needs plan. And that's kind of a board decision and not a and the
All right, thank you.
administration decision. That's not the.
Well, based on the proposal here from John, when it goes through 26, that's not really a short-range plan, it's a long-range plan. So, but I would like to move on it when we could have the bond election, first of next year. I don't know what you think, Mike. How quick you do that?
Yeah.
We have to file by January 9th, so we have to have approval by.
Yeah, I think,
He doesn't have nothing else on.
I think it's ambitious, it's doable, but I think, and this kind of goes counter to how I viewed it in the past, but I think if we're going to do it that way and try and squeeze it that tight, I want to have maybe a smaller committee, but with at least 2 board members on that committee. Because I'm respectful of everyone's time, but this is going to be very much aggressive, and I don't want the committee to go in a direction like this and give a recommendation to the board with this tight of a timeline, and the board is sitting over here when the committee went in this direction, and we don't have an agreement on it. And so I think that's why it's important that we have at least a couple of board members here on it, and allow us to make this happen that aggressively. And I think probably a little bit smaller committee, and maybe tap on some of the resources of some of the previous committee members, but also some of the, want to seek out some new members as well.
So you're talking about a short-term, short-range and a long-range committee, 2 different committees, or just one?
One committee,
Make it smaller.
but smaller, but with a couple of people at least from the previous committee, and some new people.
Okay,
Yeah.
sounds good. Because you're the one that's realistically gives.
17 mils.
Yeah.
Well, those tours will move faster than they did before.
Well, what might be helpful in that is bringing in Cody's and the building folks that are familiar with what the problems are in each facility.
Well, we did last time.
Yeah.
Jerry was at all of those meetings and led a lot of the tours and showed us the challenges and things like that.
Yeah, Cody.
Yeah, Cody will be.
I got pretty solid numbers on the roof, it's $700,000.
700.
700,000.
700,000.
That's pretty good number. I've got
Does that make sense?
The roof at, where?
Cottle.
Cottle?
That roof is gone. I won't tell you how we take care of it.
What seal?
Open air school.
You can float on it with a screen door.
Go down the river.
I'll just slide with whatever we're doing with.
Okay, well, with that direction, I'm going to move forward with a long-range planning committee formation with an aggressive timeline, and we will have, Sean will be a part of that as well. And in fact, the last time we went through this, I think we started without, I don't think we'd established our relationship with you guys.
Not when
But-
Jerry was doing there.
Yeah, but when we came, but I think you came in after the recommendations. So it would be good to have Sean's participation with this as well. That'll help us a lot along the way.
Keep us grounded. With your money.
Is there anything else that, I've gotten a lot of direction today on this that helps. Is there anything else that you guys want to talk about on this deal with us? I mean, I know that what I'm mindful of is the construction inflation, and I know that's why I'm glad that Sean's going to be with us throughout this.
It's real. There's tariffs. We're seeing, I mean, right now, even on, as weird as it sounds, we bid the job, that, it's gonna take 16 months to get built, and there's some black vinyl coated chain link fence, and within the first week of the bid being awarded, he wanted his shop drawing review so we could lock in his prices, because his price was gonna go up because of the tariffs. He's like, I gotta lock it in. So it's a real number. People are, they know if they're 6, 8, 10 months out, they inflate the prices because they know that their costs are going up. So that's, copper's going up. It's all going up.
Well, it's been a very productive meeting. I really appreciate Sean and John being here. It's actually pretty exciting. I mean, I can't believe it's been 5 years ago since we had the last long-range planning committee. But credit to Mike's leadership and the board and the architects and everybody else.